Konnichiwa, minasan. Good afternoon, everyone. Here we are at the seventh Stephen King review, and this is the seventh book I've read since September of Stephen King's. It's actually one of only two that I've read twice so far because I read this back in high school and I reread it doing this 30 book journey. I'm actually on book number 31 in case anybody was interested if I'm still reading more. I'm currently reading book number 31, which is Blaze. But other than that, the review today is for Pet Sematary, and the description or synopsis is as follows. Sometimes dead is better. When the Creeds move into a beautiful old house in rural Maine, it all seems too good to be true. Physician father, beautiful wife, charming little daughter, adorable infant son, and now an idyllic home. As a family, they've got it all, right down to the friendly cat. But the nearby woods hide a blood chilling truth, more terrifying than death itself, and hideously more powerful. So, as you could imagine, it is quite a story. And this is one personally that I actually think is his scariest book. One of his best books for sure, too. But overall, one of the hardest books to read because of how scary and deep with grief it is. So, as our usual protocol, we will discuss horror factor, story quality, suspense intensity, memorable characters, and overall rating. With this one, I gave it 10 out of 10 for horror factor because it's probably his most horrifying novel ever written, even still to this day. For story quality, I give it 10 out of 10 as well because it's a masterpiece. Among all his books, as far as all of them go, it manages to be unforgettable with the way it depicts grief in such a strong, revealing light, shining in the darkness of the story. The grief is all real. This is something that Stephen King personally admitted is that this book was very personal to him because he used things that he really was scared of in real life and incorporated them into the book. Next, we have Suspense Intensity. This one I gave a 9 out of 10. Not to say that it isn't as good as maybe one of the ones that would have 10 in this category, but there are books that I found might be a little more suspenseful. However, this book overall does have quite a suspense level of tension throughout it. The more its escalation goes, the more you're pulled into the story, where you watch it all unfold. You almost can't believe how things are going to go. It's like you're getting dragged through hell, and you have no choice but to follow along with the characters. Speaking of characters, for memorable characters, I actually gave this 10 out of 10 because most of these characters are untouchable favorites for me. There's some of the characters that I really felt the most for out of all his books. So, this totals up to a score for overall rating of 39 out of 40. The first book I read of his, and even on the second time around reading it through, I still consider it one of his best. Now, as far as final thoughts go with this is a book I could recommend to people who really want to be scared. People who really want to know just how scary Stephen King can be. This is the book I would recommend. If something too scary is, not comfortable for you, this is the last book you want to read because it is truly terrifying. And what makes it so powerful is the real sense of grief that is hidden throughout this story. And I think what makes this story so powerful is, yes, the grief, but also because the characters are so lovable that when they go through this journey through hell, out in the countryside of Maine, and all this stuff really just starts to snowball and escalate and get bigger. That's what makes it so terrifying. And one thing I could say is the movie was really well done. I'll put it this way. When I was a kid and I saw the movie, it horrified me so much, I had nightmares for 3 months. The movie, the original movie, I ain't seen the remake. I don't even believe the remake would be that good based on the changes I've heard that were made to the story. Whereas the original movie did primarily stick to the story, probably because the script was written by Stephen King himself. So he kept it very true to his original book. There were things Stephen King said that he didn't like about the movie, such as like the wife and husband's relationship, that it didn't seem as loving as it was portrayed in the book. And I agree with that. I do agree with that 100%, that it was lacking in that one area. But other than that, the movie is actually really well done, the original 1989 version, and it is terrifying. Now, what I can say in comparison to the movie and the book is even more terrifying. If you watch that original movie and you were scared by it, reading this book, you're going to be even more scared because there's stuff that they don't incorporate into the movie that is so important to the story, which is another thing I kind of wish they would have expanded on a little bit more. But then again, I kind of understand why they didn't, because they had already focused on the main points of the story very intensely. Does it take away from the movie? Slightly, but not enough to drag it down. I still actually think the movie is very good. However, I believe the story is enhanced by the spirit of the book. Like when you actually read the book, you kind of get to understand why the story is the way it is a lot more. And there's certain things that they did change or didn't put into the movie that are in the book that are absolutely even more terrifying, and I kind of understand why they didn't put those in the book, because, well, put those into the movie from the book, is because those parts, oh, I'll put it this way, I literally dropped the book reading it that first time when I got near the end with the confrontation between Gage Creed and Judd Crandall. That part alone horrified me. I literally dropped the book like, oh, how did I read such a scary thing? Like it was horrifying, right? And then there's certain elements to the end of the story and sort of backstory plots that they don't touch on in the movie that are in the book that just heighten the experience and make it even more scary. So it's definitely a book I could recommend to anybody who really wants to be scared by a Stephen King book. That's your best bet. 100%. You want the most scary? I honestly believe it's Pet Cemetery. If horror and you don't want something that scary, probably not a good book for you to read then, because this really is terrifying. And if also you're very touchy about grief and whatnot, it's also a very hard book to read for that reason. But at the same time, there is beauty to the book. That's what David Lynch always likes to say, is that, you know, with exploring a story, there has to be the contrast of light and darkness. There is so much beauty in the characters of this book that that's what makes the story so effective in horrifying you when it kind of balances out and delivers the negative end of the spectrum. So, yeah, definitely a book I could recommend to somebody who would want to be scared. If you don't want to be scared, don't read it. But I think anybody should at least take a crack at it if you're comfortable with it. But, you know, keep your guard up because this is a really hard hitting novel. So that's our review. Hopefully, everybody will check it out. I do apologize in the delay for the review. Dealing with this TuneCore nonsense has really forced me to procrastinate. But I actually have talked to some people with TuneCore. Unfortunately, Hood Tales from the Shadow Realm is still going to be shelved. But don't worry, I'm going to quietly release it on YouTube and make it private for all fans. So you'll still get to listen to the album in the future. So keep an eye out for that. But I'm going to make it private so TuneCore doesn't try to flag me for that or complain to YouTube. But I felt like, the audience deserved to hear it. Since TuneCore won't allow me to profit off it, I still want the audience to hear it. And I've got a recording session booked for Thursday, so we're finally going to get into the process of finishing the next album I'm working on, Revival, which has a lot of Stephen King themes based on it, and that's why I actually borrowed the title from one of his books. I haven't read this book yet. I read a preview of it. It was pretty good. But I just like the title Revival because I'm really getting back into some of the older aspects that I started with when I first was making music. And then from there, I'm planning to actually reform the SOS Brigade Quartet, either with some of the past members or with some new people, but we're going to be in the process of making tribute albums dedicated to all my favorite jazz artists. So keep an eye out for that. Until next time, your host, Super Kami Guru Alucard. Peace out. Domo arigato gozaimasu, minasan. Oyasumi nasai. Matane.